I work with law enforcement as well, doing training and all, and I've been asked over the years so many times, is Stephen Avery guilty and is Brendan Dassey guilty? I've given the same answer every time, and that is, all I can tell you for sure is that neither one has ever had a fair trial. Don't know if they did or didn't. I can tell you what I think. What I know is they've never had a fair trial.
Well, look, I can speak only as Brendan's lawyer, but I've represented Brendan Dassey for 15 years now. And my work on his case and getting to know this young man who was 17 when I met him, he is 33 years old now. I am so proud to represent Brendan Dassey. The only evidence connecting him to this murder is this confession we're talking about, where he's not even able to describe what happened. Every citizen who cares about truth, who cares about due process, who cares about reliability in our criminal justice system should be jumping off their couches and, rushing out there to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Not to Brendan, not to any other special education student, not to any other kid, not to any of us, right? The way the system let that boy, now man, down is just heartbreaking.
Laura provided the opportunity for us a few weeks ago to chat with Brendan. And I think it's important for me to be able to say how kind and inspiring Brendan Dassey is. And I can't imagine anybody I've talked to. I know we had Terrell Swift on your show. Anybody I've talked to that's been kind of a victim of this process, it just amazes me the hope and the positivity and the focus that they have. Because they know who they are and they know what they did or did not do. And Brendan's just one of the positive, most inspirational piece of this whole puzzle, I think.
Yeah. He's 33, as I said. And, Brendan I've watched him grow up. He's grown up into this unbelievably kind, gentle, funny person who still has this childlike faith that one day justice is going to come for him. It's remarkable. After making a murderer, all these people around the globe, millions and millions of people saw his story. They started writing Brendan letters, right? From all over the globe. You'd get these letters. He still gets like 5 or 10 letters every day.
Really?
From ordinary people who just, it's nothing profound or eloquent, who just put down on a piece of paper, hey, Brendan, hang in there. I'm thinking of you. I believe in you. Hold your head up high. The truth is going to come out. This kind of stuff. He still gets these letters every day. He keeps them. And he writes back to as many people as he can, given his limitations. He writes back to as many people as he can because those letters, finding their way to his prison cell in rural Wisconsin, some from Australia, some from, the other side of the country, some from just down the street in Wisconsin. Those letters give him an enormous amount of hope.
Laura, what is next for him, and what's it going to take for him to get released, get reconsideration, get a fair trial? What's it going to take?
It's going to take courage, Dr. Phil. It's going to take courage. If someone in Brendan's position legally right now, the best option is to go to the governor of Wisconsin and seek executive clemency. In this case, a commutation, which means a cutting short of a sentence, essentially an act that would free him.
So that's all that's left?
That's Brendan's, best option right now by a mile. So right now, we are in a process of education, of collaboration, reaching out to folks around the state of Wisconsin. Hey, have you heard about Brendan Dassey? Come talk to someone like Dave, right? A law enforcement authority who knows what he saw when he saw those tapes, who's shown those tapes to 50,000 cops around the country to train them. Come and just sit down with us, talk with us, watch this video, meet Brendan. And, I guarantee once you approach this case with an open mind, there's only one right, decent thing to do, which is free Brendan Dassey.
And what is his sentence right now?
He was sentenced to life in prison with the first possibility of parole in 2048, when he will be 59 years old.
2048.
That's right.
Good God.
And one of the amazing things, Dr. Phil, is because of all these problems with his case that we're talking about, during his trial, when he was on trial back in 2007, the prosecutors actually offered him what they call a mercy plea. No strings attached, just say you did it. We'll give you 15 years in prison. Don't have to testify, nothing. Just say you did it, 15 years. He said, no, I didn't do it. I want to go to trial. I want to get through this trial. I want to prove my innocence. Now, because he went to trial and was convicted, because people don't understand why someone would falsely confess, right?
Right.
Now he's got life in prison. He's done way more than 15 years. He's coming up on 17 years now.
Yeah, he would be out.
That's right. That's right. But he stuck to his principles and it landed him a life sentence.
Wow. That's sad. Nobody knows. But like I said, what I know for absolute certain is he has never had a fair trial, and he certainly hasn't had a fair shake. I'm having lunch this afternoon with Marty Tankleff. I worked on his case back when he was still in on trying to get him out. And as you know, he was exonerated, got out, became an attorney, is now adjunct professor at Georgetown, and works on just these kind of cases and has a family. And you just hope when you give people the chance they deserve, you see what happens. It's just astounding to me.
No, it's what you were saying before, the resilience that these folks show and the humanity that we're locking up wrongfully in these cases. Marty's a great example. And, Dave, you know Marty as well as I do.
Yeah, Marty's, again, another example of an inspiration. He's helped testify in some of these legislative hearings to get policy change. He's been a great support. And I think, if we go on just real quick back to Brendan's case, and, I mentioned we use some of these examples in our training, among other cases and examples. I tell Marty's story all the time. Most, if not all, investigators identify the same thing when they watch these tapes. And I don't know the investigators that were involved in Brendan's case. I don't know their mindset at the time. But when I talk to investigators today, when they reflect back, I'm sure they wish they would have done things differently, even just because of the reliability or unreliability that comes from those statements and the approach that was used. And I think that's powerful. We've got investigators across the globe that recognize there's an issue with the reliability of that information. And as Laura said, that's the information that was used to convict. And so we've got a simple math problem here.
Yeah, that's shocking. So what is the solution? A lot of what is being done, I think it's generous to say that it's confirmation bias. I think it's generous to say that it's tunnel vision. I think that there's just a lot of, I don't care. I've got somebody in the box here and my job's to get a conviction. I'm going to get a conviction. I've worked with so many of these prosecutors who have just told me straight up, I came over here, A, to get experience in front of a jury, and B, to build up a one-loss record, hopefully perfect. And then I'm going to jump to the defense side of the docket so I can then start recruiting these cases and say, hey, I was a prosecutor. I was your worst nightmare. I never lost a case. I know how to beat these cases because I've been on the other side. I think they've got an agenda. Some of these guys have an agenda, and then they're going to jump to the other side of the docket and try to get rich off of it. I think there's more larceny in their hearts than just simple confirmation bias. But what do we do? How do we fix this? What does the legislation need to call for?
Well, I can speak to the law enforcement piece of this. There's a slide I have in our PowerPoint that says if it ain't broke, break it. And part of the first thing that we have to do when we're training investigators is identify they've used techniques for the last several decades that in their mind have been successful because they have successfully solved some cases. And so the first thing we have to do is educate what all of these potential tactics are that can be a problem. The second thing we have to do in conjunction with that is provide education on what training does work. About almost a year ago now, in my hometown of Buffalo, New York, we had a shooting, a racist attack at a grocery store. Sentencing was just about a week ago. We had 10 people in our community were killed. And if you have to go interview the witnesses to a shooting, you can't be relying on these deceptive tactics or assuming how they're going to respond. You need to understand how trauma impacts those witnesses. And the same thing applies in all of these cases, is providing a tool for investigators to go get information. From a legislative piece, the last third piece of this remedy is making sure not only policy, and a department reflects new training, making sure that's bought in from the command staff top down, making sure the prosecutor's office knows what a reliable confession looks like. And if all that doesn't work, and it hasn't, we have to know that about 30% of wrongful convictions contained a false confession, which means about 30% of these had confessions that were admitted by the courts as voluntary. And so the important piece of legislation is to provide the courts a screening tool to identify if all else fails, this shouldn't be used as evidence in a conviction against a potentially innocent person. So I think those are at least the three prongs that we're working on this side.
I just throw one other thing into the mix here that I think another thing that surprises people, ordinary people, is the idea of prosecutorial immunity and police immunity. For those of us who are just, doing our jobs, living our lives, you make a big mistake at your job, or if you do something intentionally wrong at your job, all of us can be held liable. People can sue us, right? I can get sued as a lawyer for malpractice. We can all get sued in different ways, held accountable for the things that we do wrong. But what's wild is that for police and prosecutors, it's not the same, right? They have been carved out of that system and given special immunity. So that if you are a prosecutor, and let's say you are a bad guy, and you decide to intentionally frame someone for murder, knowing that they're innocent, right? The worst of the worst of the worst things you can do. Send them away to prison for life or maybe to death row. And you do this on purpose. You cannot be held liable under the law because of immunity, right? And police officers have qualified immunity that act to protect them, even if they do things intentionally wrong. And I think that's a huge part of the system that's got to be fixed too. We can all be held accountable to each other. And there's no reason to take a couple of groups of professions, police, prosecutors, and treat them different than doctors or teachers or, other important people with important responsibilities in our society.
Yeah, I think we're all three saying the same thing. Think about how many interrogations go on, how many interviews or interrogations, however somebody approaches it, go on every day. I think the vast majority of them don't have ill intent. I think they're trying to get to the truth, get to the bottom, find out what happened, and hold the right people accountable. I'm a huge supporter of law enforcement from the bottom to the top. But man, when you get something that goes awry, I think depriving someone of their liberty in the United States is a very high standard, and it should be. Mm. Depriving someone of their life is the highest of high standards, and well, it should be. There's got to be some kind of standard, some kind of review, check and balance system here. And having spent so much time in the litigation arena, I've told my staff here, if you get stopped, you get in juxtaposition to some crime, you don't want to say anything about anything to law enforcement. You need to get a lawyer and don't say anything.